And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Settlers of Catan is a great game, one that's known all over the world and has quite a few expansions. Cities and Knights of Catan, the Seafarers of Catan, the Traders and Barbarians. But there's more to it than that. One of the biggest weaknesses, or strengths you might say, of the game is that it only goes up to 4 players. And since it doesn't do very well at all with 2, I would never play it with that few. And 3 is kind of it seems best with 4, but why not go farther than that? Well, that's what I want to talk about today. The 5 to 6 player expansions. I'm going to talk about the first 3 here. The Settlers of Catan 5 to 6 player expansion, the Seafarers of Catan 5 to 6 player expansion, and the Cities and Knights of Catan 5 to 6 player expansion. Obviously, you need Settlers of Catan for all 3 of these, and then for each of these, the Cities and the Seafarers expansions, you need the corresponding large expansion for the game. But let's look at inside with each of these boxes, and are they worth getting? The first box is the 5 to 6 player game for Settlers of Catan. So let's look and see what's inside here. All right, we got the rules, very simple, and one of the major things that they're going to show you how to do is how to assemble the board for 5 to 6 players. Hooray, green and brown pieces, colors I actually like. In fact, when I play with only 4 players, I often use green or brown as a kind of a variation on the original one. More hexes to make those larger boards. 2 more building cards. A pile of extra resource cards for each of the 5 major types. And then a few more cards for the deck, the major deck, the development card deck, so that you can that's spread out a little bit more evenly. And then there's a few pieces here that will help you expand the board itself so that you can fit the extra hexes in it. And then more numbers so that you have actually, it's a whole brand new set of numbers for use with the larger board. So, looking at this expansion, what do we get? Basically, the only thing you're going to get here is the capability of going to 5 to 6 players. Perhaps if you want to play a regular game with more of one resource and less of another, you now have the hexes to do that. Although if you bought the Seafarers expansion, you have pretty much the same thing. So the only reason to get this one is for 5 to 6 players, but it does provide a decent amount of stuff in the box that you get. All right, well, let's look at the 5 to 6 player Seafarers expansion and see what's in that box. Now this one has a really nice rule book. Not only does it have the rule book, but then it takes each of the scenarios from the Seafarers of Catan and it expands them for 6 players. And some of them are really neat and really elaborate. In fact, when you put these scenarios on the table, they take up the entire table to put these out. They're a lot of fun, and I really enjoy that. We also see in here that we get the boats in the brown and green colors, and we get more gold tiles, another desert tile, and more sea tiles, and more of these pieces to hold the bigger, larger boards, more victory point pieces, and a few extra ports. Again, 5 to 6 players. That's basically what this box is screaming at you. And the rule book, though, is very nicely done. Is this one worth the money? Well, Seafarers is actually a pretty good expansion to put 5 to 6 players with, and so I would say yes. And that brings us to the final one here, Catan, Cities, and Knights. Is this one worth getting? Well, let's see what's inside. You got your cities, you got your knights and your walls in the 2 new colors. You got some more cards in the new commodities and some more cards for each of the decks. You got 2 new flip charts, and you got your rules. What do these rules talk about? Well, some changes in 5 to 6 players, and that's about it. All right. I've talked about the other ones. First of all, I think there's a diminishing returns here on each box goes by. This one has the least inside. That's not a whole lot you get there. But also, beyond that, I would never play Cities and Knights with 5 to 6 players. It's already long enough with 3 to 4. Adding in a 5th and 6th player, that's just crazy. The only reason I could see getting this is if you already had the 5 to 6 player expansions of the other ones, and for some reason the 4th player wanted to be green instead of white. Seems like an awful waste of money to me, though, if that's the reason you're buying this expansion. Adding a 5th and 6th player to the game also adds one more rule. There's a special building phase each turn, between players' turns basically, in which all the players can build something. they can't use any special development cards, and there's not a whole lot else they can do, but they can build more roads and more cities. And this, I think, is to alleviate the boredom while you're waiting for your turn to come around. And also because if you sit and wait sometimes for 5 other players to go before your turn, the chances of you having a huge hand of cards is higher, which means you'll be attacked by the robber more. So this is a rule that's just really necessary. 5 to 6 players will slow the game down. You'll find that you've gotten used to 45-minute Settlers of Catan games. With 5 to 6 players, that could double. The 5th and 6th player certainly adds a lot. And in fact, in all these situations, for some reason, I find myself enjoying the 5 players, and 6 players just seems like one too many. Cities and Knights, forget it. Not worth it in either case. These two, though, 5 to 6 players, I would give it a try if you really want to. But do realize it will slow the game down more. It might be more enjoyable because there are more people to trade with. But again, this is something that's up to you. Do you want more players in your game? Well, then you're going to have to get these no matter what.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.